Right, Dennis, it is great to see you, even though you're sans Zach Farley, but it's still great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I won't spend ages waxing lyrical about you because you must be sick fed up of people talking about how much of a huge influence you're on them, and must be sickly back to you.
Thank you.
I know. We do address your humble and your humble personality and your humility. It's during this interview as well. So I was curious. I'm really curious about the new project you and Zach are working on.
Right.
I was wondering what are your kind of cinematic influences? Is there a lot of kind of crossover in terms of aesthetic or tone, like in terms of your individual tastes between you and Zach, or is there a sweet spot? I know Bresson's a big influence, obviously.
We pretty much, yeah. I mean, we're pretty aligned in our tastes and interests, and I mean, he likes Bresson. I mean, obviously Bresson is like huge to me, but he definitely really likes Bresson. I mean, and I mean, it's pretty rare that we don't agree on things. We almost always agree when we see films that, you know, that we're both blown away by the same ones. I like things that can be really tricky and complicated and meta and stuff, and he's not as interested. He's more interested in things that are more emotional and sincere and stuff. So that's the only bit that's pretty rare. But I don't know. I mean, we both like Bresson. We both like. There's this experimental filmmaker named James Benning. We're both very, very big fans of James Benning. Chantal Ackerman, I know, has been kind of important, and I know there's probably a bunch, but we're trying not to emulate anybody. So that's the goal.
I actually watched them like Cattle Towards Glow last night. Right. So it's just come on to Amazon Prime over here. So I watched that last night just to remind myself what you were going for. And there is nothing like it. Like I can't think of anything that is.
Well, that was like totally an experiment. I mean, because I certainly had never made a film before, and Zach had made some videos, but he'd never ever done anything narrative. And so we were just like fooling around, really. We only had $40,000, so it was extremely kind of an underground thing. And the guys in it are all guys that we had. This guy who went out like late at night and went up to people standing in line to go into like all dance clubs and stuff, like, hey, do you want to be in a movie? That was basically how we got everybody.
That's amazing.
And we have these, because like it's in English, but a lot of the guys in it didn't speak English very well, so they never really understood what they were saying. So we were like trying all these different kinds of funny experiments. But I mean, I like the film. It's like, but it's just, after having made the second one, which is kind of more like, a more professional, it feels funny that we just ran around and did that film.
Yeah, I think it really works as a nice kind of wee isolated piece, but it does feel a bit like a pitch for Permanent Greenlight. It feels like something to show producers or financiers or something. But it was fantastic. I also loved it was one of the segments actually really shocked me. I forgot how shocking it could be. Like the second one with the guy.
The club.
And that is really quite. I hate the word transgressive, but I'm thinking about things that shock me into a response, and it was really, really shocking.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, just to make it even more shocking, Rico, who's the guy who's the spoken word guy. He's actually a dancer, but he agreed to do it because we had a hard time finding somebody who would be willing to do it, and he agreed to do it. And then right before we shot it, he broke his shoulder. And
is that what that was? Oh, right,
yeah,
okay.
And he did it anyway. And if you pay attention, you see that he has his arm in a sling, but it isn't very big. But so he was he was genuinely in pain, much less from the sex than from being thrown around on the ground.
But that's commitment. That is commitment.
He was. Yeah, no, he was. And he was getting paid like no money too. So.
I know, but it was a really daring sort of performance. Like it takes a lot of courage, I think, to. and it was fun. It was a fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I think
Thank you.
I think if you rewatch it again, it'll have new pleasures for you. Are there any kind of more modern like filmmakers, like even maybe in the mainstream, that you appreciate?
Probably nobody in the mainstream. I mean, I love Wes Anderson. He's a mainstream, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd say so. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Wes Anderson. I like a lot of people. I don't know. I don't know if they're influences, but I mean, I mean, they're mostly not like mainstream. I mean, like Pedro Costa or like Militar. I mean, they're all like working now, but they're not really mainstream. I mean, I like some mainstream films. I mean, I like blockbusters because I just like to zone out. Yeah. Although I only watch them on planes because I'm just trying to kill time because, I go to LA and it's like 12 hours. And so I just watch them to kill time. But I mean, I like that stuff. I much prefer like watching like blockbusters or horror movies than to watch like sincere movies like whatever, Coda or...
Oh yeah. Well, do you know
things I don't see those films?
Do you know what's really worrying me is that because obviously my day job is as a teacher, which is exhausting, and then I've got the new baby. I feel like my artistic motivation is diminishing slightly. Like I do want to watch like stuff that is gonna keep me in a relaxed state or a bit of escapism or something, and that's quite concerning because I don't want to get too comfortable,
Oh, the kid will get a little older, and you'll get your edge back.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you what you thought if you had even seen it. Gilles Ducournau's film Titan.
I really didn't like Titan.
Oh, you didn't like it, right?
No.
Okay.
No,
oh, interesting.
No.
But I mean, do you think there is something about the French, like they seem to have a more kind of sophisticated palette when it comes to extreme imagery or things that are outre? Or I mean, did you think Permanent Greenlight would play more successfully in France, or was that just a case of convenience when it came to funding access and that kind of stuff? Or
it was mostly just that. It was mostly just that we're here, and it just made more sense, and it was interesting to do a film in French, because Zach's French. So I mean, and we're very. I mean, obviously, French film is very, very influential on both of us. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it did. I mean, it got a very good response here, but it got a very good response everywhere. So I don't know that it really. People in the United States thought it was very French, of course, and people here kept saying it was very American, and I was like, well, it can only be because of me, because I was the only American having anything to do with the film, because it didn't seem very American. I mean, there are a couple people who said like it's like Elephant. I'm like, oh, it's nothing like Elephant.
Oh no, not at all. No, I don't.
I know. No. People were saying things like that, but that's just because it has teenagers, or well, they weren't really teenagers, but well, some of them were.
No, I agree.
But yeah, I mean, most of them were in their 20s, but there was a 15-year-old in there, so two 15-year-olds in there.
Wow.
So
right. So I can't even imagine having like seeing a film like, even I know you said you weren't a big fan of Titan, but it is, if you're 15, it would have an impact, especially if you're growing up in Scotland and it's mining country, and it's all very kind of repressed and parochial, and it would be like you can see it being quite a kind of formative experience for somebody.
It's funny you say that, because one of the 15-year-olds is the guy who played Leon's friend, with the little boy with the long hair.
Oh, wow.
And who was just a genius. I mean, he was the most, I mean, all of the people in the film are fantastic and were just perfect and everything. But he was so special that, like, with the other ones, we really, really carefully calibrated their performances so they did exactly what we want. But with Milo, he was so amazing. We were just like, do whatever you want, And just the other day, just like literally 3 days ago, he wrote me the sweetest thing, because he's now an actor. It made him want to be an actor, so he's acting, and he was writing just to say how much how much it meant to him to be in the film and wants to work with us again and stuff. So it's funny you say that, but that was great. And he was an amazing kid. It was really hard to get him, because we went into he was the first person we cast. We went into a teenager's acting school. We were allowed into them to watch, and the minute Zach and I saw him, we were like, that's him. It has to be him. Like before he even did anything, just like walking around. And then it turned out he was like, he had a really hard time at school. He wasn't going to school, and his parents really didn't want him to do it. And we had to go through this huge thing to get his parents talked into letting him do it. And it was actually kind of a big hassle, but it worked out okay.
Oh, it was worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So I'm thinking about, well, I've been thinking about writer-director duos recently. I don't know if you read Matthew Spector's Always Crashing in the Same Car. Have you had the chance to check that?
No.
It's quite interesting. It's kind of like a creative non-fiction memoir about Hollywood casualties in the kind of 70s. It's quite interesting. But it got me thinking about kind of writer-director duos, so like Frank and Eleanor Perry, and even like to an extent Paul Schrader and Scorsese and that kind of thing. So I was just wondering, how does one inform the other? Because I don't really have a lot of experience in films, and certainly nothing that ever played in theatres, but obviously you and Zach both share directing credits, but I think his credentials are much more in the background of visual arts, whereas you're predominantly known as a writer, although you do dabble in other mediums. But is there a process, or is the relationship quite symbiotic and organic, or?
Yeah, it's really, really symbiotic. I mean, we get along extremely well, and we really just have kind of, I mean, we're very different in a certain ways, but we just think so much alike. And it's, you know, it's one of those just where it's rare things where you meet someone where you really just like are. I mean, I met him, and within 2 weeks we were collaborating. It was just like immediate. We were immediately started doing it because it was so natural. So and it's a good balance because I'm primarily a writer and he's primarily a visual artist. And when we make the films, I mean, the scripts are mostly mine, and the visuals are mostly him. I mean, I let him, because that's his thing. You know, I'm not a visual person. So he basically figures out how to shoot the film. I mean, we talk about everything, and then when we shoot it, he's the director. Basically, he's sitting in the director's chair, and he's making all the decisions. Although we discuss everything all the time, and I'm mostly watching the performances and working with the performers. So yeah, it works out really well that way because we each have our strengths, and yet we work really well together. I mean, it really feels like completely like a mutual. I mean, it feels like completely like it's both of our work. It doesn't feel like. I mean, I collaborate with a lot of people. I collaborate with just this director, Giselle Vienne.
Yeah.
But it's her work. That in that case, it's like I'm writing stuff for her work. And this, it's very much like, because we cast it together, we rehearse it together, we shoot it together, we edit it together, and everything is completely equal. But he has a real strong visual sense, and I don't. I mean, I went to film classes when I was in college because I wanted to make films, and realized very quickly when I started taking classes and trying to make films that it was just terrible. I couldn't do it. It was terrible. And I saw the other people in the class making these things, and I was like, oh, I can't. So I just gave up. But I always wanted to make films. So it's kind of perfect because, I take total ownership of like what we're doing, even though I'm not technically, the director. So.
Yeah, but I'm sure Zach he'll have ideas about the narrative shift, the narrative, like where maybe something should go. So I suppose it is a kind of mutual, a bit of interweaving contributions, I suppose, to an extent as well, I'm sure.
Well, there's also, I don't know how much you worked on the Bird film, but the DP has a lot of input. The person is the director of photography. So with the first two films, and Michael Salerno was the DP, and he had a lot of influence on what was done. And now we're going to work with this French, mainly a photographer. She's mainly a photographer. She also makes films, and that will very much influence what happens too, because she has a very strong vision. We like working with people who have a really strong vision so that we can collaborate and stuff. So the DP doesn't really get as much credit as I think probably in almost all films, but certainly in ours, it doesn't get as much credit as they deserve, because they really have a lot of ideas about how to shoot things. I mean, when we were making Permanent Green Light, we had such a short time, and we had such an elaborate shoot planned out, and we had to keep cutting it. So we didn't have the time. And there's a scene where there's a little funeral in the scene, and originally, we had like 28 shots we were going to do, and the guy who was coordinating the production just like, no way you can do 28 shots, you have 2 hours or whatever. So then we couldn't figure out what to do, but our DP Michael was just like, here's what we do. We do a tracking shot and we cut it down. And it basically ended up being 4 shots. And he just figured it out like that. And I don't know what we would have done if he hadn't been there and known how to do that.
That's so cool. I'm glad you brought up Michael Salerno, because obviously he's a great publisher as well with Kiddie Punk, and a very strong visual style that seems to kind of really complement your work as well. So I was wondering, are you allowed to talk about the next project, the room? Is it Room Temperature? Is that what it's called? Is that official? Sure. Will that be a French production? I think I read somewhere it was going to be filmed in Los Angeles, but I might have misread that.
No, we're shooting it in Southern California, in our really close to Los Angeles. The executive producers are in Marseille. So, but everything's going to happen in Los Angeles, and the co-producers are in Los Angeles. And then we also have a co-producer, because the person who did Permanent Greenlight Local Films is going to do the post-production. So they're a co-producer. So technically it's more of a European production, but everybody we're going to be working with when we actually make the films is in Los Angeles. So, and everything about it. I mean, we do have the French DP, and we have the only person we cast so far is this young actor who's going to play one of the parts, and he's French, and we're flying him over. But otherwise, I mean, it's going to feel totally American. There's nothing about it that's going to seem French, but technically the people who are raising the money and overseeing the very high level stuff, not on the ground stuff, but the people who are doing that are here.
Okay, that sounds great. I mean, just when you were talking about Giselle Vienne before, are you and Zach also working on some kind of 3-episode television series as well?
Oh boy.
See, I've done my homework.
We did. Oh, horrible.
Oh, sorry. Trauma.
Okay. No, the Arte. Do you know Arte?
Yeah. The channel. Yeah.
Arte. Basically, we were doing a television series for Arte. That was the idea, and Giselle would direct it, and Zach and I were writing it, and it seemed great for a while, but they just kept demanding more and more and more and more and more compromises and more rewrites. And it went on for 5 years. It was so much work, and we got so little money. And ultimately, it got to the point where they pushed us too far. And we got to the point where it was like, we can't live with this. We can't, we're not guns for hire. We have a vision. We want to make the thing we want. And they kept saying it has to be more conventional, more like this. So ultimately it fell apart, but after 5 years. So that was that. And then the idea was to change it into a film. So then Zach and I rewrote the script and consolidated stuff and made it into a film script. And for Giselle to direct. And that may or may not happen. I suspect not. But then actually, then I got this idea that I was going to turn it into a novel, that we would turn it into a novella, and but a novella in conversation, in dialogue with minimal. So that it became a single, The Has Been, because it wasn't called The Has Been.
I was going to ask you about The Has Been, because I knew you and Zach, there was talk about you working on a novella or a book.
So we worked on that for a really long time, and now it's changed into something else. Now it's going to be. So it's hard to describe, because it's going to be like a radio play, but at the same time it's a novel.
Okay.
So it's going to be probably available as an audiobook and maybe as a listening experience. But it's going to be a novella that's performed like it's a radio play. So that is I think the best way to do it, because I think it's pretty interesting on the page, but it was really meant to have these performances and voices. So, well, I'm green.
I know. Yeah, it was good. I thought that was deliberate.
No, I don't know what happened.
I like it. Anyway. I think you should keep it. I like it.
You like it? Okay. Oh, cool.
Like
I look like like a Robert Eggers film. So yeah, that's going to be our next project after we finish the film is we're going to do this radio play book novel thing. So yeah, it's about a woman who's a ventriloquist, who's the daughter of a very famous ventriloquist, someone who was the most famous ventriloquist in the world. It's based on a true story, because there was this guy who was the most. When I was a kid, there was this guy named Edgar Bergen, and he was like everywhere. He was like Elvis. I mean, he like you couldn't get away from him. He was so famous. And he had this dummy named Charlie McCarthy, very, very famous. And he died, and then his daughter is Candice Bergen, if you know who that is. She's like an actress. She was in a lot of films in the 70s and 80s. Anyway, it's kind of based on that. But anyway, in our version, the daughter inherits the puppet who she hated because the puppet got more attention than she did. And she lives with this puppet, and she basically treats it like it's a human being. So they're like, and then chaos ensues.
Sounds fucking great. That sounds brilliant.
It's funny. It's good. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, just again on the topic of Giselle and you know, puppetry, and I love the work that you've done together previously, and I love the kind of life cycle of Jerk, because I know that you worked on that it was originally an Ugly Man as a short story, and then it became this kind of marionette show, and there was a lot of collaboration again, like ventriloquists and musicians and that kind of thing. But could you ever see a cinematic adaptation of Jerk in the future? Or do you think the medium of puppetry is kind of key?
Just came out.
Oh, seriously?
It's a film. It just got released in France 2 weeks ago. It's a film.
Oh my God, sorry, but that is mind blowing. Wow.
Yeah,
I like to get my finger in the pulse, but sorry.
Well, I actually, several people have said, is there a screener with English subtitles? It's in French. So if there is actually one, and I can get it, because a bunch of people have asked me for that, I'll send you the link. It's good. It turned out really well. Yeah, we adapted it because Jonathan performed that. Jonathan Canterville is insanely brilliant in it, as you will see. He did it for such a long time and flew all over the world to do it, and he just is like, I can't do this anymore. So he stopped, and then we can't, and it's so much. I mean, it depends on him so much that we decided we would make this film. So we made a film, and it's actually really good. It's a very intense piece. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's very intense. I mean, people faint and stuff. But in the film, it's even more intense. So it's kind of strange how that worked out. But yeah, it's a film. It just came out. Yeah, Giselle directed it. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. And when you were talking about the has-been maybe becoming an audio experience, like I know you've also ventured into video game territory, the kind of virtual walkthrough of a haunted house.
Right, there's that too, yeah.
And again, that a lot of collaboration with curators and musicians, and so I've got two questions. How do you feel about video games? And you've kind of answered this question already, but how important is collaboration to you, like the process of it?
I love video games. They've been a really big influence on me. I wrote a novel called God Jr. that like mostly takes place in a video game. Mm-hmm. I'm like a Nintendo guy, so it's mostly Nintendo. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just because I always, because I don't like conventional fiction, right? I just don't. And I'm always looking for different ways to make things move forward, but in an unusual way. And like, I really got obsessed with how in video games, the forward movement is you're like, you have a certain amount of freedom. It's very simple what happens, but you have to solve puzzles, or you have to do this and this. So I got really excited by that, about if I could to try to do that in my fiction. And I also really like the space inside video games. I think it's very beautiful. It's very immersive, and you kind of believe it, but it's so fake, and everything's kind of, like kind of cute, but you just kind of go with it. And so yeah, then they were a big influence on me, and like like the Marble Swarm is probably really influenced by the video games and stuff. So yeah, I really, really like video games. And collaboration, yeah, I've always collaborated. I mean, I always collaborated. I mean, sometimes I was like in charge or something. I mean, when I was a kid, when I was a really little kid, I set up a theater in our attic, and I got together with like my siblings and people from the neighborhood, and we had a theater company, and put on plays. So I was doing that from this is when I was like 10, you know, and then, you know, I used to do haunted houses in our basement, and I was the boss, but there were, you know, all the other people collaborate with me. So yeah, I've done, and then I collaborate with Ishmael St. Jones. I collaborate with a lot of people, and I really, really like it. I really like it a lot. I really like, especially because, you know, with being a writer, you know very well, it's like, you know, you're God when you're a writer. You can, you know, basically do whatever you want. I mean, but when you're collaborating, you have to kind of like, I don't know, you have to, you know, listen to what other people are saying and think about their work or their things. And thing about the theater is really interesting is like, it started with the theater thing is like, I have to think about what Giselle wants. And then I have to think about, because it was kind of new to me at the time, was like, then there's performers, and it's like, okay, this person, and this certainly is true in the films, it's like, okay, this person embodies this character. It's like a physical person who embodies this character, who's like an autonomous person who has like strengths and weaknesses and everything. And then so you have to adjust what you're doing to like kind of fill them in, or, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that was really exciting to me, considering I'd always just made everything up. But to have an actual, the kind of like limitation or whatever of having a physical person there, it's a limitation. It's also really exciting. But so that I really like working. I'm liking working with theater, of course, the films too. But I do really, really like. I got kind of spoiled because Zach and I are such like-minded that it's like I've sort of like spoiled.
Yeah.
And Giselle, I mean, I've worked with Giselle forever, so. But I do. I'm very. I don't have an ego about that kind of stuff. It's really, really easy for me to like just take a back seat and just fill in what they need. I don't have. I really like. I like doing that, and I don't have like any issues about the control. I'm not a control freak.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the keys to a successful collaboration is that is ego kind of get in the way in a way. Do you know what I mean? You can't, because I feel like I know what this isn't about my writing, but like if I like to collaborate as well.
You do a lot too.
Professionally collaborate as well, and I kind of think it's because I'll never collaborate with people that I admire. Yeah. So I'm never forced to collaborate with people. You know, like it's not as if there's going to be two completely, you know, diametrically opposed visions. They're going to be kind of similar, and I know I'm probably a bit more insecure in my, you know, ability and vision. So like I always think that whatever somebody else brings to the table is a great idea, you know, and it just enhances it.
I was actually just the other day I was wondering like how you collaborated with David on the Cronenberg book. Like how did that work? How did you guys do that?
So that was really easy. It was very similar to you and Zach, probably, just that I mean, he's like a Harvard educated, you know, very erudite, you know, intellectual American, and I'm a sort of, you know, I'm from a place called Cumnock, which was voted the worst place in the UK. So and it's so I mean, we're from kind of, you know, radically different backgrounds, but the influences that, you know, that sort of have collated and formed our artistic personality or something are just almost identical. Okay. And again, he's very like, he's no control freak, and I'm no controlling, and I think as long as it's nobody's a maniac, do you know what I mean, then it'll be fine. You know, as long as you're not working with Michael Cimino or something, or some kind of somebody who's very kind of singular. But so it was pretty easy. And all the collaborators, we only asked people that we knew could contribute something to the sort of central thesis or what, you know, where the book was going. And so it was so easy. And I wrote a story with Brian Evanson recently as well. And
how was that?
Yeah, it was easy. It was just really easy. It was just like, you know, I just sent him the sort of.
Did you send him back and forth, or did you do it that way?
Just back and forth, and it was so easy. And I've never had a negative collaboration. Like I've never. I don't know about you. You don't have to name names, but have you ever had a negative experience collaborating?
Not that I followed through on. I mean, there were people who asked me to collaborate with them, and I was interested. But then when we started working together, I still regret this. A long time ago, I was gonna write a film for this young director, and he was David Lynch's assistant. In fact, his name's all over David's work, Lynch's work. And David Lynch gave him $1 million to make a film, and he wanted to work with me on the script. and I was really excited because, you know, David
Mhm.
Lynch was producing it. And also my
That's
friend
huge.
was cool, but we could not agree. We just simply could not agree on anything. It was just like, he just kept wanting to do all this shit, and I didn't want to do what he was going to do. So ultimately I was just like, dude, you have to do this yourself, because I can't, like, we don't agree, and it's just frustrating to me, and as much as I want to do it. And then of course he never made it, so it's all kind of sad. But so yeah, there's one.
Interesting. This is great.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to ask you about how you felt about Dermot Hester's critical analysis wrong. I've heard that there are a few sort of factual discrepancies, and there may be aspects of Dermot's interpretation of your work that you maybe feel are a bit overextended, but it's such an undeniable, intense labour of love. Like, and you really do strike me, and I know you hate compliments, but you really do strike me as somebody who has got great humility. And is it quite surreal having such a comprehensive and like academic retrospective written about you? Or sorry, is this?
No, it's no, yeah, no, it's definitely surreal. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of like, over time I've been sort of like figuring out how to deal with that whole situation. I'm really, really, really grateful and blown away that he did it, and he did a lot of work, and he says a lot of great things in it. And you know, and I've talked to him about it. It's just like, he had a kind of idea of how to interpret my work, and it's like, that's totally, and I understand that's what they do, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to do it through punk or whatever. And it's just like, so it just that it ends up being, you know, if it's like this is my life, and I have this idea of my life and what influenced me and stuff that's kind of bigger than that, you know. But so it's like, to take it and make like punk much more important than it was to me, you know, that's kind of stuff. It's like weird. It's like, well, dude, you didn't mention like psychedelic music in the 60s. You didn't mention lo-fi indie rock and early techno, which was just as important to me. You know, it's like, it's stuff like that where I'm just like, there's a few things in there that he got wrong. I mean, but it's not, I don't have like huge problems with it. Just when people ask me, you know, sometimes they'll say like, oh, you know, because he does the thing about like that my anarchism was influenced by Paul Goodman, who I found through Frank O'Hara. I read a paragraph of Paul Goodman in 1970, didn't like it. So I'm just like, dude, like, I have to say, that just didn't happen, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just stuff like that he makes it seem like I'm friends with Patti Smith. I'm not friends with Patti Smith. I've never been friends with Patti Smith. Where did you get this? It's like that. So because he's, you know, there were things, because he came here and interviewed me, and I'd say, well, don't you want to ask me about this? And he'd be like, well, I already read this stuff online. I'm like, well, dude, you know, some of that stuff online isn't really true, you know. Anyway, so you know, there are little things, but generally I'm happy with the book, and I'm, you know, super grateful. And it's just, there are little things, you know, it just, that's what they do. I mean, people keep saying, you know, that's what they do. They pick an angle, and then they see your work through this angle. It's completely normal. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it is really completely normal. And it was awesome of him to do it. So
Yeah. It's great mythologizing on Dermot's part. You know, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So the last question, because I know you'll be busy as well, and I can hear the baby screaming, so I'm going to wrap it up. So you're much more than a writer, as evidenced by your work with Zach. But in a way, do you feel like your last book, I Wished, was a kind of concluding statement, not just to the George Miles cycle, or that being a focal point, but just maybe to writing novels, those kind of novels in general? Because I was wondering, could we ever see you take a step into like genre fiction? Because I would fucking love to see a Dennis Cooper science fiction novel, like a space opera. It'd be amazing.
I don't know how to do it. I never ever I never studied fiction. I have a really, you know, I play around and I experiment and I do all these things, but I don't know how to do a lot of stuff, and I don't want to know how to do. I mean, I never learned how to do those things. I don't like plot. I don't like psychological development. I don't like all that stuff, but I also don't have a fucking clue how to do it. And I've read very, very little science fiction literature, like very little. And I like genre. I used to like detective novels and stuff. I used to really like, you know, all those guys, but I can't imagine doing it. I mean, it would be very, very difficult. I think I have to stick to my weird shit. The book, I wished, it wasn't meant to be part of the cycle or anything like that. It's just that I wanted to write a really, really personal book that was really emotional, because I'd never done that before. I never like made my life and my feelings. I just always use that stuff as like, that's no more important than anything else. I'm going to use that in the work. But this was like, I want to write something that's super personal. And I chose George because that's like the most difficult thing for me. And so I did that. And then it's like, well, if I'm going to write about George, I have to mention the cycle, because I wrote the cycle for him. So the cycle ends up being part of it. And I understand why people say I just don't think it's being part of the cycle. I feel like if you read it and you didn't know what the cycle was, you could just think I just made it up.
Yeah.
But so I don't know.
I was going to ask, do you ever think that because I Wished is such a personal book, do you ever feel like people asking you questions about it kind of trivializes like the no? Okay, that's okay.
No, you have to really, especially with a book like that, you have to completely understand like that they're really outside you and they don't know George. And no, I never. I mean, no one has yet. I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, I haven't had a problem with that at all. I mean, I have problems with different kinds of things. It's like, I have problems when people like who've read books and like objectify the characters and think they're hot or something. Then I'm just like, oh, it's so disrespectful, because I try so hard not to make them like sexy boys. It's like I hate that stuff. So that bothers me. But no, I mean, it's a weird. I mean, it is weird to talk about that book, but I kind of got in my head how to deal with that. So, and most people, because it's so personal and so emotional, people they know that they shouldn't really go there. It's like, it's either you feel it or you can't relate to it or something.
Brilliant. So. Dennis, listen, thank you so much
thank you
for this
thank
interview.
You.
This was absolutely right. I'm gonna stop the recording